The clock struck midnight, and the fluorescent lights flickered above the empty hospital corridor. It was the kind of night that made the shadows seem alive, creeping along the walls as if they had a mind of their own. Sarah adjusted her scrubs, feeling the chill of the air conditioning seep through the thin fabric. She was used to the night shift, but tonight felt different. There was an unsettling energy in the air, a tension that made her skin prickle. Sarah had worked at St. Mary's Hospital for 3 years. The night shift was usually quiet, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the distant sound of nurses chatting in hushed tones. But tonight, the hospital felt like a different world. The silence was oppressive, and every sound echoed eerily down the long, deserted halls. As she walked past the nurse's station, she noticed that Ellie, the head nurse, was unusually tense. Her eyes darted around the room, and she kept glancing at the clock. Sarah approached her, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, Ellie, everything okay?" Sarah asked, forcing a smile. Ellie looked up, her expression grave. "I don't know, Sarah, it just feels off tonight, like something is waiting in the dark." Sarah frowned. "You're just tired." "It's been a long week maybe," Ellie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I swear I heard whispers coming from the old wing earlier. You know, the part that's been closed for years." The old wing of the hospital had been abandoned after a series of strange incidents. Patients had reported seeing things, figures moving in the shadows, voices calling out in the night. It was a place that had become a ghost story among the staff. Sarah had never believed the tales, but Ellie's fear was infectious. "Let's not scare ourselves," Sarah said, trying to sound light-hearted. "It's probably just the wind." Ellie shook her head. "You should be careful." "There's something about tonight," with a wave of her hand. Sarah dismissed the thought. She had a job to do. She checked the patient charts and made her rounds, the familiar routine grounding her. But as the hours dragged on, the feeling of unease crept back in. The hospital was too quiet, too still. In room 304, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson lay in bed, his breathing shallow. He had been a patient for weeks, his condition worsening by the day. Sarah adjusted his blanket and checked his IV. As she turned to leave, she heard it, a faint whisper like a soft breeze brushing past her ear. "Help me." She spun around, heart racing, but the room was empty. Mr. Thompson was asleep, his face peaceful. Shaking her head, she chalked it up to exhaustion. She needed to focus. As she moved on, the whispers grew louder. They seemed to echo down the hall, calling her name. "Sarah." Sarah, the sound was haunting, a chorus of lost souls. She quickened her pace, trying to shake off the dread that clung to her. In the break room, she found Ellie sitting alone, staring at her phone. "You okay?" Sarah asked, concern creeping in again. Ellie looked up, her eyes wide. "Did you hear it?" The whisper. Sarah nodded, her stomach twisting. "I thought it was just me. They're getting stronger," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "I don't like this. I want to leave. Let's just get through the shift," Sarah said, trying to sound reassuring. "We'll be fine." But as the night wore on, the atmosphere thickened. The whispers turned into cries, echoing through the halls. They seemed to come from the old wing, beckoning her closer. Sarah felt an inexplicable pull, as if the shadows were reaching for her. Against her better judgment, she made her way toward the old wing. The door was slightly ajar, creaking ominously as she pushed it open. The air inside was stale, heavy with the weight of forgotten memories. The dim light flickered, casting eerie shapes on the walls. "Hello," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered her, thick and suffocating. She took a step inside, her heart pounding. The whispers wrapped around her, swelling in the darkness. Help us, help us, help us. The hairs on her arms stood on end as she ventured deeper. She could feel the presence of something, an unseen force that made her skin crawl. The walls were lined with old photographs of patients long gone, their eyes seeming to follow her as she moved. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hallway. Sarah jumped, adrenaline surging through her veins. She hesitated, torn between fleeing and investigating. Curiosity won out, and she took a deep breath, pushing forward. As she approached the source of the noise, she saw a door swinging open and closed, as if something was trying to escape. The whispers grew louder, turning into frantic pleas. Help us, Sarah's heart raced. What do you want? She shouted, her voice trembling. The door slammed shut, and the whisper stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. She pressed her ear against the door, straining to hear anything. Just as she was about to turn away, she heard it, a soft, desperate sobbing from within. Please, help me. Fear gripped her, but she couldn't turn back now. She pushed the door open, revealing a dark room filled with dusty old equipment. In the corner, a figure huddled on the floor, shrouded in shadows. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice shaking. What happened? The figure looked up, and Sarah gasped. It was a young woman, her face pale and gaunt. I'm trapped, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They won't let me leave. Who won't? Sarah pressed, stepping closer. The ones who died here, the woman said, tears streaming down her cheeks. They're angry. They want revenge. Suddenly the air grew cold, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Help us, help us, panic surged through her. I can't help you, she cried, backing away. I need to go. But the woman reached out, her hand trembling. Please, you have to help us. We're trapped between worlds. In that moment, Sarah felt a wave of sadness wash over her. The woman's eyes were filled with despair, and Sarah knew she couldn't just leave her there. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Find the truth, the woman said, her voice fading. You must uncover what happened here. Before Sarah could respond, the room grew darker, the shadows closing in around her. She stumbled back, heart racing, and fled from the old wing, the whispers following her like a haunting melody. She burst into the break room, gasping for breath. Ellie looked up, alarmed. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I think I did, Sarah said, her voice trembling. There's something in the old wing. We need to find out what happened there. Ellie's face pale. You're not serious. We can go back there, but Sarah was determined. We have to. If those voices are real, we can't just ignore them. Reluctantly, Ellie nodded. Okay, but we stick together. No splitting up. They gathered flashlights and made their way back to the old wing, the air thick with tension. As they approached the door, the whispers returned, swirling around them like a storm. Help us. Help us. Help us. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open again. The room was just as they had left it, the shadows dancing in the corners. What do we do? Ellie whispered, her voice shaking. Look for clues, Sarah said, her heart pounding. Anything that can tell us what happened here. They searched the room, sifting through dusty files and old medical records. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a series of reports detailing strange occurrences in the hospital, patients claiming to see figures in their rooms, inexplicable sounds echoing through the halls. This is crazy, Ellie said, flipping through the pages. It's like the hospital is haunted. Maybe it is, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But we need to find out why suddenly a loud bang echoed through the hallway, making them jump. What was that? Ellie exclaimed, her eyes wide with fear. Stay close, Sarah said, gripping her flashlight tightly. They moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, the whispers growing louder with each step. As they rounded the corner, they found a door ajar, the sound of muffled cries coming from within. Please, help us. With a nod, they pushed the door open, revealing a dark room filled with old hospital beds and medical equipment. In the center stood a group of shadowy figures, their faces twisted in anguish. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. We are the forgotten one, of the figure said, its voice echoing like a distant memory. We were patients here, left to suffer and die. Ellie gasped. What do you want from us, Justice? The figure replied, its eyes piercing through the darkness. You must tell our story. You must make them remember. Sarah felt a surge of determination. We will, she promised. We'll make sure everyone knows what happened here. The figures nodded, their expressions softening. Thank you, they whispered, their voices fading into the shadows. As the room grew silent, Sarah and Ellie exchanged glances. What do we do now? Ellie asked, her voice shaking. We gather evidence, Sarah said, her resolve strengthening. We'll tell the truth. They spent the rest of the night documenting everything they had found, determined to bring the hospital's dark history to light. As dawn broke, the whispers began to fade, replaced by the soft glow of morning light. When their shift ended, they reported their findings to the hospital administration. It wasn't easy, but they pushed for an investigation into the old wing. Slowly, the truth began to unravel. Months later, the hospital was forced to confront its past. The stories of the forgotten patients came to light, and the old wing was finally closed for good. Sarah and Ellie stood outside, watching as the building was sealed off, a sense of closure washing over them. But even as they walked away, Sarah could still hear the faint whispers in the wind. Thank you. Thank you. The night shift would never be the same again. And as she lay in bed that night, she knew that the shadows would always linger, a reminder of the lives lost and the stories that needed to be told. The hospital may have silenced the whispers, but the memories remained, haunting the halls long after the lights went out.